All right.
Hang on.
Carrie, confirming we're ready?
We are now ready.
All right. Today is April 21st, 2025. Meeting is now open at 4:00 p.m. A copy of the Nebraska Open Meetings Act is located on the north wall of the county boardroom. We'll do a roll call now. Randy Bennett.
Here.
George Forrest. Diane Bruce. Jonathan Davidson.
Present.
And Melissa Kimmerling, present. Absent then is George Forrest and Diane Bruce. Also attending, Carrie Plummer-Galecki, Board Secretary, and Mary Davis, HR Director. So Carrie, did we have anyone wanting to speak during the open comments portion of the meeting?
No, we did not.
Okay, we'll move on to item 2 then, approving the minutes from the March 27th, 2025 meeting. Do we have a motion to approve?
I move to approve.
Second?
I'll second.
Motion by Davidson, second by Bennett. Please vote.
Three yay, 2 absent, motion carries.
Okay. Item 3. Discuss and make recommendations to Sarpy County layoff policy. Mary Davis, HR Director. All right.
Okay, on the layoff policy, this is currently one of our policy bulletins with the county. And the biggest change that you'll see in this policy is we changed the layoff order. Temps, provisional, casual employees, if there were to be a layoff, we would follow all the rules and regs as far as notifying employees. And then the order would be temps, provisional, and casual employees first, probationary second, and third would be the regular part-time and full-time, depending on the office needs and things of that nature. We had regular part-time. We had part-time before probationary, and we all have to remember that our part-time employees are also classified, members of the classified service as well. So, and then on the recall notification, there was a question about notifying by registered mail. And, I think, all those policies were developed years ago when, and registered mail could be a requirement. But we would first talk to the employee, let them know that they can come back to work, send an email. If we are not able to get a hold of them, we would follow up with a registered letter. If we were able to get a hold of them, there would be no need for the registered letter and for that expense. So that's why we've got that in there.
Great. And I feel like I understood that part and full-time were kind of listed together because the person's position, duties, all of that may indicate whether they were part of the layoff or not. It's not necessarily part-time before full-time. The position, they kind of could occur depending upon the layoff.
Yeah, it would all depend on the reason for the layoff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Do you have any questions, gentlemen? Okay. Mary, were you contacted by anyone to request to make comments?
I was not.
Okay. No one requested to appear before the board and give their views on the proposed rule. Therefore, no comment period was provided. Do we have a motion?
I'll move to accept the layoff policy dated 4/10/25.
Do we have a second?
I second.
All right. Motion by Bennett and seconded by Davidson to recommend approval of revisions to Sarpy County layoff policy as presented. Please vote.
3 yay, 2 absent, motion carries.
Great. Okay, agenda item 4, discuss and make recommendations to Personnel Rules and Regulations, Rule 2, Regulation 2, Grievance Procedure. Mary?
Okay, with the grievance procedure, there really wasn't a whole lot of changes to that. It was more updating the language. We did simplify the definition of a grievance. which is basically any dispute or difference between the employer and the employee with respect to the meaning, interpretation, or application of county policy. And then with respect to disciplinary actions, when somebody grieves or appeals, the disciplinary actions, those goes directly to the Personnel Policy Board because the elected official or department head are making those decisions.
So for this one, it's grievance specifically to meeting, interpretation, or application of county policy. It can't be
Yes.
like, I don't like the air conditioning and how it's set, right? It has to be related to a policy, right? Form of
Correct.
policy,
That's
okay? So in our last meeting, there was a public comment about an application of a time off versus not time off. Is that the type of thing that would follow under this?
It would definitely.
That helps me make sense of the what identifies as a grievance. Were you contacted by anyone to request to make comments?
I was not.
Okay. No one requested to appear before the board and give their views on the proposed rule. Therefore, no comment period was provided. Are we ready to motion or any further discussion?
I'll move that we accept Rule 8, Reg 2 grievance procedure 4-10-25, Rev 4-15-25.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Motion by Bennett and seconded by Davidson to recommend approval of revisions to Personnel Rules and Regulations, Rule 2, Regulation 2, grievance procedure as presented. If no further board discussion, we can vote.
3 yea, 2 absent, motion carries.
All right, we got a fun one for item 5. We've got discipline. So item 5, discuss and make recommendations to Sarpy County Personnel Rules and Regulations, Rule 7, Regulation 1, discipline. Mary, an overview?
Sure. With our discipline policy, and I might retitle this to call it a discipline and appeal process because we added the appeal language in here too. So if you don't mind, I'd like to do that.
Sure.
But progressive discipline, basically in a nutshell, you get a verbal reprimand that is written, that is, followed up in writing, and then a written warning. And/or the biggest change here is we added the performance improvement plan to this document because we are currently doing that now. And so we just kind of codified what the practice is. And a lot of times if employees are having performance issues, rather than go down that, writing them up, they'll put, maybe they'll have a written warning and then be placed on a PIP so that they can sit down with their supervisor, find out what areas they need to improve on, and then have regular meetings. With goals are set, they have regular meetings, and so that at the end of each week they know whether or not they are improving or what they need to do in order to improve. And then at the end of that PIP, an employee could be disciplined up to and including termination of employment if they're not successful with it. So that's one of the biggest changes. And then following the written warning and or PIP, you've got your final written warning and or suspension. And where that is a little different is in basic traditional progressive discipline, you have your written or your verbal, your written, your suspension, your demotion, that kind of stuff. And so with this, the final written warning could stand in and of itself, or it could be tied with a suspension. If you have an employee that's having performance issues, a suspension may not be the wisest thing to do. Everything is taken on a case-by-case basis, really. They could just be given a final written warning. You have to improve or else. Or if the department head believes that, some people need to be hit in the wallet, if you will, before they figure things out or before their performance or behavior improves, then they'll go ahead and suspend them. Employees can be demoted if they are, let's say struggling as a supervisor or, having conduct that's not becoming of a supervisor, then they could be demoted back down to demoted down to the next level below them, if you will. And then obviously the last one is termination of employment. So when all else fails, then the employees could be terminated. So,
Now, I feel like I understood from the writing that these steps somebody could jump ahead. You don't have to start with verbal warning.
Correct.
Is there any situation in which someone could be terminated without having gone through any of these steps?
absolutely.
There is.
If you've got cases of harassment,
Workplace violence.
workplace violence,
Okay.
bullying, theft.
In those cases, other policies kick in to help that supervisor. I'm just thinking about what helps that supervisor, what protects the county in supporting supervisors making similar decisions for similar issues across departments. Do you feel like there's enough guidance that people would be treated in different departments pretty similarly if they could start anywhere on that?
Oh, absolutely. So our office, when it comes down to something like that, typically our office gets involved. And, like I said, it really depends on what is going on, what each case is taken in and of itself, I guess. But if you have an employee that's stealing in one department and they're being terminated, chances are if they're stealing in another department, it could be termination too.
So the collaboration with HR that's part of this policy helps ensure that those supervisors are protected in their decision-making.
Sure. And usually if department heads, elected officials are going to skip steps on discipline, that's a conversation that we'll, have in HR.
Sure.
They'll reach out to HR and talk about that. And everyone knows too that if they're going to make that recommendation and have it stick, they better, that recommendation better be solid, because if it's not, those employees can come to the personnel policy board and get their job back.
Sure.
And so, that we have to follow those steps. We have to give those employees a chance, or if it's egregious, conduct, then we better make sure that we have all of our information, which means, if somebody's accused of theft or harassment or whatever, the county will do an investigation to make sure that that is actually what happened, and then make that discipline recommendation based on that report.
That sounds good. I appreciate the inclusion of the written performance improvement plan, because it's been my perspective that people can be in a heightened emotional state when receiving verbal feedback from their boss, especially on poor performance, and having it written allows them some time and some reflection and some, to make sure they really understood what they need to change, versus making an assumption that they maintained a clear head.
And Carrie does a really good job. She takes care of all of our employee relations with that regard, and the employees, she puts together the performance improvement plans. She talks to the department heads and elected officials or supervisors about that plan. And so that everybody's on the same page when they walk into that meeting and when they leave.
Great.
So she makes sure that the employee understands everything that's in there as well.
Yeah, okay, that's very good to hear. Wonderful. Any other discussion?
And then, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Mary,
Just
sorry.
real quick, the louder mill, we mentioned the louder mill. Employees have the right to have a louder mill hearing if they're if they suffer financially as a result of any discipline, whether that's termination, suspension, those kind of things, or demotion. They can always appeal to the personnel policy board. I'm sorry, they will have a louder mill hearing where they are able to have that conversation with the department head or elected official as to why they should not be demoted or suspended or terminated. And then the last final is I included that appeal section in this policy.
Yes, okay, good. Okay, Mary, on this one, were you contacted by anyone to make comments?
I was not.
Okay. No one requested to appear before the board and give their views on the proposed rule, therefore no comment period was provided. Any further discussion, or do we have a motion?
I move to approve Rule 7, Regulation 1 with the recommended changes and request that the title be changed to Discipline and Appeal Process.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Davidson, seconded by Bennett to recommend approval with revisions to the Sarpy County Personnel Rules and Regulations, Rule 7, Regulation 1, with a change in the name to Discipline and Appeal Process. If no further discussion, we can vote.
3 yea, 2 absent, motion carries.
All right. Item 6, discuss and make recommendation on revisions to Personnel Rules and Regulations, Rule 8, Regulation 1, informal complaints. Mary?
I recommend that this policy be removed with the understanding that employees should always be encouraged to talk to their department heads, supervisors, if they have an issue. You know, that this policy specifically says that if you're annoyed, you can go down this formal complaint process and then bring it to a grievance. And that's not always necessarily the case. You can be annoyed, but it might not be grievable.
Right.
You know, so we encourage anybody that's having issues, no matter what the case may be, big or small, to talk to their supervisor, department head, elected official. If they can't talk to those people, they can always come talk to HR. We'll try to get the group together and figure things out. But anyway, that's just the rationale for removing that.
How does the employee know that that's the kind of culture that you have here, that they're encouraged to bring those things forward? How do they know that they're safe to do that? Do they learn that in orientation? Is it something supervisors model, or how would they know that they can do that?
I would hope that it's something that supervisors model. We encourage that, encourage that open door. If anybody has any questions about it, they can always contact HR and talk to us about it. But, you know, is that 100%? Do I know for sure 100% that people know that?
Yeah, that's okay.
I don't, but that's, you know, that's what we encourage.
The employee's protected, though, through boards like
Absolutely.
this, as far as any negative retaliation that would come
Absolutely.
forward. So they know that at least, that they have.
People, the employees should never be retaliated against because they have an issue with their employer or want to talk to their supervisor about something. That door should always be open. They might not agree, you know, but they can always agree to disagree, if you will. Now, if they feel like a policy has been violated and things of that nature, then we have,
A grievance
you know,
process.
we have that review process.
So say they did bring something forward and then they felt that they were unfairly, they had a consequence associated, then we have the grievance process where they could bring that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. And we do have that Integrity Counts website if people want to make anonymous complaints.
That's right.
You know, employees have done that, gone through that route, just because they might be uncomfortable talking to their supervisor, so they want somebody else to look into it. And so then, you know, there's a team that looks into it, and then we try to figure that out. But otherwise, open communication is always the better choice.
Were you contacted by anyone
No.
related to this? Okay. No one requested to appear before the board and give their views on this proposed rule. Therefore, no comment period was provided. Any further discussion, or do we have a motion?
I move that we remove Rule 8, Regulation 1, informal complaints.
I'll second.
Okay, a motion by Davidson and seconded by Bennett to recommend approval on revisions to Personnel Rules and Regulations, Rule 8, Regulation 1, and formal complaints as presented. We can vote.
3 yea, 2 absent, motion carries.
Okay. Item 7, discuss and make recommendation on revisions to Personnel Rules and Regulations, Rule 8, Regulation 3, appeal procedure. Mary?
With this one, we just talked about it. This was included with the discipline and appeal process. So we just don't need a separate regulation for that.
It was brought over as written, right? No changes to it?
Oh, there were some changes. It was updated, the language was updated.
That's right. That's right.
And I can run through that if you'd like.
Yeah,
me to.
I wouldn't
Yeah.
mind because I wasn't looking at that as much. And that's in grievancy.
So the appeal procedure, the tenured classified employees can appeal 3 written warnings. If they've received those within the last 12 consecutive months, they can appeal those to the Personnel Policy Board, and also suspensions without pay, demotion, or terminations. New language that was added, the performance improvement plans in and of themselves cannot be appealed to the board. However, any disciplinary action that results from those, whether that is termination or suspension, those can be appealed to the Personnel Policy Board. And then we just talk about, the appeal process. You can submit an appeal form to Human Resources within 15 days of the event. And then we will hold a hearing in accordance with the personnel rules and regs.
Mary, do the details and timelines in Rule 8, Reg 3, do they match the now approved timeframes in Rule 7, Regulation 1, discipline and appeal process?
Yes,
Perfect, thank you.
absolutely.
Great. Thank you for taking a second to
Yeah,
circle
no
back to
problem.
that section
No
of
problem.
the aforementioned rule. On this one, were you contacted by anyone to request to make comments?
No, I was not.
All right. No one requested to appear before the board and give their views on the proposed rule. Therefore, no comment period was provided. Any further discussion? Are we ready for a motion?
I'll move that we remove Rule 8, Reg 3 appeal procedure.
I'll second.
All right. Motion by Bennett and seconded by Davidson to recommend approval of revisions to Personnel Rules and Regulations, Rule 8, Regulation 3, appeal procedure as presented. And if no further discussion, we can vote.
Three yea, 2 absent, motion carries.
Okay. Moving on to item 8, discuss and make recommendations to Sarpy County Policy, secondary employment. Mary?
So our current secondary employment policy is held within Rule 6, General Terms and Conditions, Regulation 2, Conflict of Interest. And so there is a paragraph that deals with secondary employment, and which basically says that you cannot work at a second job if it conflicts with your current responsibilities at Sarpy County. And then if you are working at a job and a conflict is discovered, you'll have 7 days to remedy that. And so this new policy, it's a standalone, a separate policy, and it just kind of outlines the current reg. it just expands. It expands. There's an expansion to that. And basically, in a nutshell, we encourage employees to work second. I mean, if employees feel like they need to work second jobs, we certainly do not discourage that at all. However, your secondary employment cannot conflict with what you're doing here. That is, in job responsibilities, as well as we just, employees need to be mindful that Sarpy County is your primary job, and then you have your second job. So if your second job is causing you to have performance issues at your primary job, then that might not be in your best interest. So if people start coming into work late because they are, maybe they're a bartender and closing late at night, they start coming into work late, then, there's going to be conversations with the employer. But anyway, we encourage employees to work second jobs. They'll fill out a form. That'll be reviewed by the department head elected official to determine if any conflict of interest exists. And if there is no conflict, they'll sign off on it and let the employee know that it's been approved. If there's a denial, they need to let the employee know why it's denied and return that back to them in writing so that they know. And then one of the additions is that basically, and we do this now anyway, a lot of our departments do, is they renew that secondary employment form once a year. And I think in corrections, they actually do it twice a year during their shift bid change and things. So anyway, we're going to align that. We met with the advisory committees, and they would like HR to align that so that it's not basically on the department head's rate. I mean, so the department head doesn't have to think about doing that all the time.
Right.
So we'll send out notices during our open enrollment time. We'll send out the form saying, hey, it's time to update your secondary employment forms and get those back to your department heads for a January 1 effective date. So we'll go ahead and take care of that. So we'll make sure it gets done.
Yeah, I was very interested in documentation because that's one of the things we talked about with that conflict of interest was adding some documentation. So just having those be regular things that are double checked again and brought to the front of the employee's mind, I think is a great idea.
Right. And Christine, she does a good job with talking to the employees at open enroll, and I'm sorry, when they're hired on their onboarding about secondary employment too. So.
Yeah.
Mary, I notice under letter F, employees may not use paid sick leave to perform work for another employer. I'm flashing back to a previous policy approved in this meeting where that specific behavior was referenced as something not acceptable. So if it is discovered that an employee has called in sick to do a shift of some sort outside employment, that could immediately escalate into the disciplinary process because it's clearly delineated for I think that's a great policy, and I like the way this is written. I think that's going to be part of the education process that people's going to have. I mean, there's small mistakes and there's big mistakes.
Exactly. They are.
If you work late one night and you oversleep the next day, that's something to have a talk about.
Sure.
If you call in sick to go to another job, that's not necessarily the same conversation.
Exactly right, because now you're falsifying time cards and everything.
Yeah.
Falsifying records, if you will.
So HR will play a key role, I think, in educating managers, elected officials, et cetera, and in enforcing that sort of practice.
Yes, for sure.
Question as someone who doesn't work for the county, maybe that's the reason I'm here, just to have this viewpoint
right.
to it. Do you have a sick time different than paid time off?
Absolutely.
So they could use paid time off, planned vacation
sure.
time. They can't use
Absolutely.
sick time.
Very cool.
They just can't use sick time.
Wonderful for me to know. Some
Yep.
companies are bundling all of that together and just giving you a bucket of either or, but the employee could take the day off. They couldn't call in
Absolutely.
sick, not show.
They're going to have to change that.
Yeah.
They're going to have to change that pretty soon.
Oh, maybe.
That's what through the legislature. I think we got to, October to change it or something like that?
For sick and vacation to be
Yeah.
together.
There's got to be sick days that are,
Oh, yeah. Are separate. Yeah. Okay, good. So the employee who obviously works for the organization or for the county would know that it would be implied from letter F that they would be able to use their vacation days.
Yeah, they can use any time, they just can't use sick time.
They just can't use sick time. Okay, great. Okay. Mary, were you contacted by anyone on this to make comments?
I was not.
All right. No one requested to appear before the board and give their views on the proposed rule. Therefore, no comment period was provided. Any further discussion, or do we have a motion?
I move to approve the new policy on secondary employment as submitted.
I'll second.
All right. Motion by Davidson and seconded by Bennett to recommend approval of revisions to Sarpy County Policy Secondary Employment as presented. If no further board discussion, it's time to vote.
3 yea, 2 absent, motion carries.
Okay. Item 9, discuss and make recommendations to Sarpy County tobacco-free workplace policy. Mary?
This policy is currently a policy bulletin, if you will. We follow the Nebraska Clean Indoor Act. And basically, employees are not allowed to smoke in county facilities, buildings, things of that nature. So there was a few changes made to that policy. There are, we took out language. There's language in the policy that says, if, you see somebody smoking in our parking lot, you need to tell them to stop and not do that. In reality, it's easy. That's an easy thing to say, but I personally don't expect our county employees to confront a member of the public and tell them to stop smoking, because who knows where that would lead
100%.
in this
Yeah.
day and age.
Yeah.
So I took that out.
Yeah.
Anyway, so with that, there's, like I said, you can't smoke in county facilities, vehicles, things of that nature. There's designated areas throughout the county where people can smoke. And if it's an employee, it would have to be on their break times. So,
It's interesting that there's still designated smoking areas versus just not at all on county property. But makes sense.
I don't have a perspective on right or wrong. I do have a perspective on taxpayers getting to make a choice. And when they come to the campus, they're entitled to a choice, whether they smoke or don't smoke. And by segregating space,
That's true.
you're allowing everyone to express their rights.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Great. Mary, were you contacted by anyone to request to make comments here?
I was not.
All right, no one requested to appear before the board and give their views on the proposed rule. Therefore, no comment period was provided. Do we have a motion?
I'll move to accept the tobacco-free workplace policy dated 4/10/25 as presented.
I will second.
Okay. Motion by Bennett and seconded by Davidson to recommend approval of revisions to Sarpy County tobacco-free workplace policy as presented. And if no further board discussion, time to vote.
3 yea, 2 absent, motion carries.
Okay. Item 10, discuss and make recommendations to Sarpy County workplace lactation support policy. Mary?
So this policy is currently a county policy bulletin, and it's called Nursing Mother. And so we recommend changing that title to Workplace Lactation Support Policy. And, basically, the county is responsible for accommodating nursing mothers for up to 1 year after the birth of their child. And, by law, we're supposed to provide adequate space, with electrical outlets, furniture, storage area. Privacy. Yes, privacy for sure.
That's important.
It's in the language.
Yes. And it cannot be a restroom.
Yep.
Anyway, what this policy says is that when an employee, leaves, or before they go on maternity leave, a supervisor, department head, elected official should have a conversation with that employee, provide them a copy of this policy, so that if they're choosing to pump at work, then we could come up with a lactation support plan, if you will. Because a lot of times employees come back to work after they've had a baby, they come back to work and they're like, now what?
Yeah.
What room am I supposed to use?
Yep.
What time am I supposed to go? All of that kind of stuff. So I think it will help ease the anxiety and things of both the employee and the supervisors of what to do when asked about this. So the lactation support plan will have, the designated space. Some employees can use their private office. Some employees don't have a private office, so we have to make sure they know where they can go with the facilities. There's rooms in each one of our facilities, so we'll have to let them know how to do that, how to sign out, if they have to reserve a space or whatever the case may be. Where to store their breast milk, how that works. And then there's, the break time itself. So we are to provide reasonable time. We are to accommodate for reasonableness, if you will. So there is language in here, basically in a nutshell. Fair Labor Standards says, you have 20 minutes for a break.
Yeah.
Anything less than 20 minutes has to be paid, right? Anything over, employees have to use their, paid leave, flex their schedule, do something. So with the nursing mother policy, with this policy, first 20 minutes are, if an employee needs 20 minutes and that's it, that's great. Because if you're pumping in your own office, you might not need a whole lot more time. Right. But if you have to walk across this courthouse, it could eat up some time. So basically, in a nutshell, if an employee needs more than 20 minutes, then we come up with that plan, right? They're able to flex their schedule. They could take, maybe if they take an hour lunch, they would take half hour and use their additional time for breaks during the day. Come in early, stay a little bit later. But anyway, the bottom line is we have to accommodate reasonable breaks for nursing moms, and that's exactly what we'll do. So HR will work with that department head elected official and come up with a plan. So when the employee comes back to work, the supervisor can talk to the employee about, here's your plan. So they have everything that they need, and they'll discuss it, and hopefully we can figure things out.
It's nice to provide that prior to the maternity leave so that they can make an informed decision about whether that's something that they want to continue.
Exactly.
Because if not, you don't just, you have things you need to do while you're still with that child if you're going to wean from doing that. And so that gives them some time.
Yep, exactly
I
right.
appreciate that.
So hopefully that'll make this process a little bit easier for those moms that, come back to work. So.
All right, Mary, has it been working well with the rooms that you have? You haven't had, issues with scheduling or anything like that in the situations where people are using any sort of shared space? That's been working well?
We always have, there's always an issue that pops up now and again, but we work, when an issue pops up, we try to address that the best that we can. So, there are rooms available and, the employee does have the choice of using their private office. So,
and that probably works for a lot of individuals.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, sure. And if there are any issues, employees are always encouraged to talk to HR about it so we can try to figure things out.
Okay. Wonderful. All right. Were you contacted by anyone to request to make comments?
No.
No one requested to appear before the board and give their views on the proposed rule. Therefore, no comment period was provided. Any discussion, gentlemen, or do we have a motion?
I move to approve the creation of a new policy, workplace lactation support policy, as submitted.
I'll second.
All right. Motion by Davidson and seconded by Bennett to recommend approval of revisions to Sarpy County Workplace Lactation Support Policy as presented. If no further discussion, we can vote.
3 2 absent, motion carries.
Great. Okay, last one. Item 11, discuss and make recommendations to Sarpy County Workplace Bullying Policy. Mary?
So this is a new policy. It's mentioned in, our code of conduct and things of that nature, but it's really best practice to have a separate policy for this. And just with all of the bullying that goes on in the world today, it's just a nice reminder that, people need to be kind, be respectful in the workplace. And that's basically what this says.
So I understood from the policy that your examples is includes but not limited to, right? Because the person on that receiving end, if they feel that the actions are being bullying, they can still bring that forward, even if it's
absolutely.
not something that's specifically here.
Absolutely. I'm just trying to see if I put that in there.
Yeah, you have that.
It
There
includes, but it's not limited to.
Okay. Yes.
And then the examples.
Yes, includes but not limited to. Great. And then like item 2, work interference or something that prevents work from getting done. I think, that helps the employee know too. It's really anything that is happening that you feel is interfering with your ability to do your work. Now, this kicks into another policy if this kicks into disciplinary actions, right? Like that's if someone reports and it becomes evident that someone was engaging in bullying, then we move into disciplinary actions policy for what could happen to them, verbal warning, written warning. That's why none of that is here, because we kick into that policy.
Any violations.
Would go there. Okay.
Yep.
Or consequences are within that policy we reviewed earlier today. Okay.
Yeah, it is. Let's see. Under C. Well, never mind. B says, you need to report it. C says that, talks about employees in supervisory or managerial roles that ignore it. So I don't have that section in there where disciplinary action can be taken up to and including termination. So I can add that under.
No, that's in the policy description.
Is it in the policy description? Oh, I'm sorry, it is.
Employees found
It
in
is, that's
violation
why.
of this policy will be disciplined
Perfect.
up to
Okay,
the
great.
determination of other adverse action.
I'm glad you caught that because for some
Yes.
reason I was thinking it was going to be.
Typically, it's
and
down,
Yes.
it's under policy violations, but this one's right at the top.
Great. Oh, great. Wonderful.
Thanks for finding that.
Thank you.
Reading is fundamental.
It's an important skill. I absolutely appreciate that. Any other discussion, gentlemen? Or Mary, were you contacted by anyone to request to make comments?
I was not.
Okay. Since no one requested to appear before the board and give their views on the proposed rule, therefore no comment period was provided. Any further discussion, or do we have a motion?
I move to approve the new workplace bullying policy as submitted.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Davidson and seconded by Bennett to recommend approval of revisions to Sarpy County Workplace Bullying Policy as presented. If no further discussion, we can vote.
Three yea, 2 absent, motion carries.
Okay, thank you for your time today, Mary.
Sure, I
this.
just have one more quick comment. So I'm officially retiring from the county, and I appreciate all of your time and support throughout my time here at the county. You guys do great work for our employees, and so I, for one, appreciate that. And then you will have, I've got a number of policies, we have a number of policies drafted. And so while I will not be presenting them, I just want you to know that those have been put into place. And Carrie and the new HR director will present those to you, and it'll move on until we get it done.
We
Okay.
think it's been wonderful to get to know you and to meet you, and thank you for your service to the county for all these years, and hopefully you have a wonderful and enjoyable retirement.
We will. Thank you.
You swing by and hang out in the audience sometime just to see how we're doing.
Nope.
She's not going.
I might watch you on TV.
There you go. Well, thank you again
thank
for
you.
your
I
hard work,
appreciate it.
Mary.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate you too. All right, item 12 is adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I second.
All right, motion by Bennett, seconded by Davidson. Time to vote. Okay,
3 yea, 2 absent, motion carries.
all right, meeting adjourned at 4:46.